When a child goes missing, most of us imagine the worst. We think of abductions, trafficking, or violence. But there is a horror even deeper than that, one that most refuse to believe is real. While the world focuses on cartels moving drugs and weapons across borders, another trade travels the same routes in the shadows. It is quiet, organized, and fueled by desperation. This is the black market for human organs, a hidden network that turns living people into inventory. Every missing person, every vanished child could be another transaction in a system that profits from the body itself. How widespread is illegal organ and body part harvesting? Where is it most active? What is the difference between legal and illegal organ harvesting? Is there a social or financial disparity involved?
Hello, I'm Colin Heaton, former history professor, Army and Marine Corps veteran, and welcome to this episode of Forgotten History.
The international black market in human body parts is one of the most unknown and yet lucrative business models. In the illegal trade, the victims are not alive to testify that they gave consent. Most victims are never found, and those who do willingly sell an organ, whether legal or not, most often do not testify in court against their purchasers. Current research indicates the trade makes conservatively about $1.2 billion per year, involving many countries, but that amount may be even higher than reported. This is due to transplant tourism, which is the purchase of a transplant organ abroad that includes access to an organ while bypassing laws, rules, or processes of any and all countries involved. In addition, these black market transplants are often dangerous to both the donor and recipient due to unsafe and unsterilized conditions and unqualified surgeons. Because of these conditions, compatibility and safety screenings are often unreliable or skipped entirely. As a result, recipients frequently contract serious diseases such as hepatitis, cancer, or HIV. In some cases, both the donor and the recipient of the organ travel to a country with adequate facilities to perform a legal surgery. In other cases, a recipient travels to receive the organ of a relative living abroad, which is often legal. In 2007, 2,500 kidneys were purchased in Pakistan, with foreign recipients making up 2/3 of the buyers. In the same year, in Canada and the United Kingdom, experts estimated that about 30 to 50% of their transplant patients illegally purchased organs abroad. The kidney is the most commonly sought-after organ in transplant tourism, about 75% of all illegal organs harvested, with prices ranging from as little as $1,300 paid to a donor to as much as $150,000 or more paid by the recipient. Reports estimate that trading involves kidneys, but livers are also in high demand, with prices ranging from $4,000 to $157,000 because they are regenerative, making liver donations non-fatal, but they are far less common due to painful post-operative recovery periods. Other high-priced body parts commonly sold include corneas at about $24,400 and unfertilized eggs at $12,400, while lower-priced bodily commodities include blood at $25 to $337 per pint, skin at $10 per square inch, and bones and ligaments average $5,465. Hearts and lungs are also in high demand. This spawned transplant tourism and organ trafficking of these parts, which is very rare due to the sophisticated nature of the transplant surgery and the state-of-the-art facilities required for such transplants and extremely long recovery periods. Most nations ban the practice. While internationally condemned, Iran is the only nation that allows organs to be bought and sold for money. Iran still places restrictions to limit transplant tourism, and foreigners are not allowed to buy the organs of Iranian citizens. Under Iranian law, organs can only be transplanted between people of the same nationality. So, for example, an Iranian cannot purchase an organ from a foreign national. In Iran, the price of a kidney ranges from $28,000 to $45,000. But on the black market, The same kidney can be worth over $100,000, with most of the proceeds taken up by middlemen. The typical price paid to donors on the black market is thought to be about $5,000, but some donors receive as little as $1,000. Often, would-be donors are tricked into selling organs or threatened with violence or simply kidnapped. Common deceptions include being told human beings have 3 kidneys, or that kidneys regenerate after being removed, or being falsely told they will experience no negative side effects from a kidney removal. In fact, kidney donors may face serious lifelong medical challenges and be unable to work. Australia and Singapore recently legalized monetary compensation for living organ donors. Proponents of such initiatives say that these measures do not pay people for their organs. Rather, these measures merely compensate donors for the cost associated with donating an organ. Australian donors receive 9 weeks paid leave at a rate corresponding to the national minimum wage. Kidney disease advocacy organizations in both countries have expressed their support for this new initiative. However, due to the long waiting periods regarding donor organs and the medical tests to ensure compatibility, many wealthy people who may not be at the front of the lines for a transplant often use their wealth to jump ahead of the line. This is where the black market truly profits, but the demand for organs far exceeds what legitimate transplant systems can provide, and that's where the black market steps in. People being kidnapped and killed for organs is not unusual, and one case stands out. The arrest of Martha Alicia Mendez Aguilar on September 2, 2025, exposed the Jalisco New Generation cartel's role in the black market. Aguilar allegedly lured poor pregnant women to remote locations where she would perform illegal C-section operations, often killing the women and harvesting their organs while trying to obtain the required infants for the black market adoption and organ transplant businesses. Joe Kent, director of the DNI's National Counterterrorism Center, said that Martha Alicia Mendez Aguilar, aka La Diabla, is one example of what terrorist cartels will do to diversify their revenue streams and finance operations. Mendez Aguilar remains in Mexican custody pending trial. But so far, the activities attributed to La Diabla are outside U.S. territory. But we still have hundreds of thousands of missing persons that entered the U.S. illegally who have not been found, especially children. Please see our video on that subject. So, this is a borderline case. Cartel involvement in infant and organ crime with U.S. demand, but not a domestic U.S. cartel trafficking persons within the U.S. for organ harvesting. The Department of Justice has recently expanded efforts against human smuggling and trafficking rings that cooperate with cartels or operate across U.S.-Mexico borders. 4 individuals were charged in the U.S. in 2025 for conspiring to smuggle children from Mexico for nefarious purposes. These prosecutions involve smuggling, exploitation, and trafficking of vulnerable persons, including children, but none of the public indictments mention organ removal or transplant harvesting due to lack of evidence. These professional organ thieves span many countries. A 35-year-old Ukrainian woman known only as Ksenia P. was caught by Polish border guards under an Interpol Red Notice posted in 2020 issued from Kazakhstan as part of an organized criminal group trading in human organs and selling 56 kidneys. She was wanted in Kazakhstan, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Ukraine, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Thailand for illegally harvesting organs from 2017 to 2019. She was convicted and sentenced to 12 years in prison, but she still faces extradition to the other nations mentioned after her sentence is complete. In the United States, it is not quite as bad, but still a problem. Although American federal law prohibits the sale of organs, it does permit state governments to compensate donors for travel, medical, and other incidental expenses associated with their donation. In 2004, the state of Wisconsin took advantage of this law to provide tax deductions to living donors to defray the cost of donation. A man named Levi Itzhak Rosenbaum of Brooklyn, New York, who called himself a matchmaker, was arrested by the FBI in a sting operation after a 10-year investigation. He brokered the sale of black market kidneys, buying organs from vulnerable people in Israel for $10,000 and selling them to desperate patients in the U.S. for as much as $160,000. Rosenbaum often used intimidation. At a 2008 meeting with the undercover agent, Rosenbaum claimed he had an associate who worked for an insurance company who could take the recipient's blood samples and send them to Israel, where they would be evaluated for a match. No questions were asked as to how the organs were obtained. A lawsuit filed by 8 families against the Alabama Department of Corrections, colluding with the University of Alabama at Birmingham to harvest organs from deceased inmates without obtaining consent from their next of kin, in a disturbing and systemic disregard for human rights. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services is investigating organ donation practices after a Kentucky organization allegedly began harvesting organs from people who may not have been dead at all. In one case, a man, T.J. Hoover, was declared brain dead after suffering an overdose in October 2021. Although he was not an organ donor, doctors attempted to harvest his organs while he was still showing signs of life. Approximately 45 minutes into the procedure, after T.J. was taken to the operating room, a doctor informed the family and they had stopped the procedure. Basically, it was euthanasia for organs. It would have been murder. A House subcommittee held a hearing on organ donation safety lapses, some concerning Kentucky-based nonprofit Network for Hope, which merged with Kentucky organ donor affiliates. Some universities fell under investigation for harvesting. For example, 6 people, including the manager of the anatomical gift program at Harvard Medical School, are facing federal charges after allegedly conspiring to harvest and resell human organs from cadavers donated for medical research. Cedric Lodge, 55, of Goffstown, New Hampshire, allegedly removed human organs from the morgue he oversaw, bringing them to his home. He and his wife Denise then sold them for profit, according to the U.S. Department of Justice, which announced the indictments. A co-defendant, Joshua Taylor, pled guilty in May 2025 to interstate transport of stolen human remains. Sentencing is pending and the case is still active. Matthew Limpy, 52, of East Bethel, Minnesota, was indicted for his role in the multi-state organ trafficking ring. Candace Chapman Scott, 37, who worked at a morgue in Little Rock, Arkansas, will serve 15 years in federal prison for transporting stolen human body parts, including fetuses, out of Arkansas, and conspiracy to commit mail fraud. But what about those people who receive organs ahead of others due to their status? Late Pennsylvania Democrat Governor Robert P. Casey is a fitting example. The governor somehow jumped ahead of thousands of much younger and healthier patients awaiting transplants for organs. On June 14, 1993, the 61-year-old Democrat somehow received a heart and liver from a 34-year-old deceased donor only one day after being placed on the recipient list on June 13th, while most patients spend months or even years waiting for an organ. The transplant occurred at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center in a 13-hour operation. The odds of someone being placed on the list, then matched to a donor, then a donor being available in just 24 hours are less than hitting a hole-in-one in golf over 1,000 times in a row. Casey continued to suffer long-term effects of his disease and died of a viral infection on May 30, 2000, at age 68, in Mercy Hospital in Scranton. The University of Pennsylvania Medical Center also got into trouble for violating ethics regarding organ harvesting and stopped performing liver and kidney transplants at the Milton C. Hershey Medical Center over federal concerns about ethical processes and institutional culture. Penn State Health discontinued its troubled liver and kidney transplant programs amid federal scrutiny. In St. Louis, Missouri, 22-year-old Larry Black Jr. arrived at a St. Louis hospital after getting shot in the head. A week later, he was taken to surgery to have his organs removed for donation, even though his heart was still beating and his family had doubts. Larry Black Jr. was only moments away from having his organs harvested when neurosurgeon Dr. Zoni Zani ran into the room and ordered them to stop. That Black was his patient and he had not authorized the procedures. The transplant team refused to listen, saying they had the family's permission to harvest the organs. This was true, but the family was not informed that he was still alive. He had not been certified as brain dead. Today, Black, almost 30 years old, said he is haunted by what he remembers from those days while he was lying in a medically induced coma, and he heard everything that happened. In the U.S., the firm Biomedical Tissue Services, owned by Michael Mastromarino and his associates, were charged for illegally harvesting human bones, organs, tissues from cadavers without consent, forging consent forms, and selling them for great profits. The business was shut down by the FDA in 2005. Organ transplants save a growing number of lives in the U.S. every year. with more than 48,000 transplants performed in 2024, according to the Organ Procurement and Transplantation Network. But thousands die awaiting donations that never come, unlike wealthy politicians and celebrities who pay to go to the front of the list. But the greatest violator of laws and human rights is China, and see our video on the Uyghur slave labor force in China. Chinese hospitals have worked with police to harvest organs from prisoners against their will. They are examined for organ compatibility, and once deemed suitable, their healthy organs are surgically removed to supply the country's booming transplant industry. Beginning in the 1990s, China saw a dramatic rise in organ transplants. By the early 2000s, it had become a global leader in the industry. China also standardized its organ collection process, specifying which hospitals can perform operations and establishing the legal definition of brain death. In 2007, China banned foreign transplant patients and formally outlawed the sale of organs and collecting a person's organs without their consent. But then times changed. In China today, minorities including Uyghurs, Tibetans, Muslims, and Christians are killed for their organs. Adding to the suspicion, Chinese hospitals advertise transplant wait times of mere weeks compared to months or years in other countries. China had customarily relied on executed prisoners as its primary source of organs, but no longer. In 2015, Chinese authorities claimed they had transitioned to a voluntary donation system, but critics pointed to the lack of transparency and discrepancies in organ availability. But it is not just potential donors being incarcerated. Medical practitioners are also detained in labor camps, prisons, and re-education centers and forced to perform the testing and harvesting. The World Health Organization proved that prisoners undergo blood tests, organ function tests, and tissue typing, procedures not conducted on other prisoners but crucial for organ matching. Allegedly, healthy donors are killed or left to die after their organs are removed. Organs are then sold to Chinese citizens or international patients seeking transplants, sometimes sold by auction. In August 2024, The Diplomat reported his interview with one Ching Pai-ming, the first known survivor of China's forced organ harvesting. Investigations and interviews with surgeons confirmed the practice of organ theft and murder. Ching recounted how he was subjected to repeated blood tests and a subsequent forced surgery while imprisoned in China, and later discovered during medical exams in the U.S. that segments of his liver and a portion of his lung had been surgically removed. This is interesting because historically, China had one of the lowest organ donation rates in the world, which stems from traditional beliefs, as most Chinese prefer to keep the body intact after death, so voluntary organ donation in China is quite rare. There is irrefutable evidence that the CCP's unethical transplantation industry continued throughout the pandemic. Independent investigators are denied access to detention centers and transplant facilities. Data on organ donation and transplantation remain unclear. Former Nigerian Senator Ike Ekweremadu and his wife were convicted in the UK in 2023 of conspiring to recruit a man to give a kidney in exchange for money, deceiving him about the purpose of travel. They had money, and after their daughter Sonia became ill in December 2019, they sought a kidney. Royal Free consultant Dr. Peter DuPont concluded the donor was unsuitable after learning the potential donor had no counseling or advice about the risks of surgery and lacked the funds for the lifelong care he would need afterward. Dr. DuPont refused to participate, and an investigation was launched after the young man in question ran away and told police. The doctor said, "I was too young, but the man said if you do not do it here, he would carry me back to Nigeria and do it there." After this setback, the Ekwemeradus then looked to Turkey to find another donor, which was foiled. Ike Ekwemeradu was sentenced to 9 years, 8 months. His wife got 4 years, 6 months. The doctor involved got 10 years. India, which has a thriving black market business, the Crime Investigation Department arrested several doctors and traffickers for running kidney transplant rings, such as the Gurgaon kidney scandal in 2008. The racket transplanted kidneys from poor donors to patients overseas in the UK, US, Canada, etc., over a span of several years. The kingpin of the Gurgaon cartel, Amit Kumar, was arrested in Nepal in 2008 and later convicted. Anesthesiologist Dr. Rutala Venkata Rama Santosh Naidu was arrested by Indian authorities in August 2025 in connection with another interstate human organ trafficking racket. Victims were not always volunteers. Dr. Santosh from Visakhapatnam administered anesthesia in these surgeries. In total, 24 people were accused in this network, which conducted clandestine kidney transplants disguised as legitimate donations in multiple hospitals. In 2008, the Medicus Clinic in Kosovo was implicated in illegal kidney transplants involving poor donors from Turkey, Russia, Moldova, Kazakhstan, etc. Doctors including Lufti Dervishi, his son, and others were eventually convicted. Some individuals charged remain at large, including Turkish and Israeli nationals, with connections to the aforementioned group in India. Another case that exposed the dark side of the illegal organ trade was the Pavisi case in Brazil, where a 10-year-old boy, Paulo Veronese Pavisi, had his organs removed before being officially declared brain dead. The result was that 2 doctors were charged and convicted, receiving 25-year sentences each for murder, conspiracy, and illegal organ removal. These cartels targeted their victims from vulnerable populations seeking the poor, migrants, and marginalized groups. Many potential donors are openly offered money for an organ, but many times deception and coercion are employed, and victims are often misled about consent, payment, or a medical condition. Many just disappear. Yes, organ harvesting is a very lucrative business.
Thank you for watching this episode of Forgotten History. If you liked what you saw, please click like, share, and subscribe. And if you would like to assist with the ever-increasing cost of production, please consider becoming a channel member and joining our Patreon page. Please check out our merchandise store. And thanks for watching.